Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world on this Saturday or Sunday morning. It's good to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. So, today, hey, Sandy's Orchids. It's good to see you. See you as in your name pop up. Thank you so much. I was going to go on webcam today just to show you what I had done, but I didn't connect the right camera. Duh. Michelle Fucarino, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Right. Well, what have we got here tonight? Let me see. I know who's backstage. I would like to bring her on, but she's not quite ready yet. So I'm just going to pop her up there. It's Julie's Orchids all the way from good Australia. Dania Tortelli, it's good to see you. Hi. Thank you for being here. Welcome, welcome. Wow, it's someone's bedtime soon. Hey, from Texas, Anita Brown. Thank you so much for being here. Also, Julie's Orchids is not quite, well, she needs to unmute. It's okay, good stuff.
I think I'm unmuted now.
You are fully on air. Fully
Yeah.
on air. This live stream tonight is actually a part two because my goodness, did we get into the ins and outs of starting a grow space last week with Trisha's Orchid Life. And I had actually had the thumbnail as in pros and cons, but there's no point in doing pros and cons if we don't know how to, what do we look out for when we want to create a growth space. And boy, did that live stream extend itself. So I thought pros and cons part deux, and with Julie's Orchids, because her grow space is two separate areas and she has different insights altogether. And well, I thought it would be interesting, and here she is. She's made time for us on her Sunday morning from sunny, warm, summery Australia. Hey, Julie.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Yeah.
Morning coffee is still hitting the bloodstream.
That's a good thing. That's a
Yeah.
good thing. It'll come on eventually, probably when we're just into the meat and bones of the stream. Anyway, so we've had a little bit of an exchange. If you're not familiar, let me just do this. If you're not familiar with Julie's Orchids, I'm going to put the link of her channel into the chat. And if anybody else is here that has a channel, make yourself known because I will put your link into the chat as well. This channel does not discriminate, just to make sure. There we go. That's Julie's channel right there. And I'll have her name in the title when we finish the stream. A little bit of a surprise. Sometimes it's nice. And I'll put her link into the description as well for anybody watching on replay. Thank you so much, even if you're here on replay. I appreciate that you're here. Remember to put your comments down, your questions down as per a normal video when the replay finishes. And if you have questions while you're in the stream, use our channel names. If you want to ask Julie's Orchids a question, just type at Julie's Orchids. It'll highlight for her on her side so she can see it. And the same for me, it'll highlight for me. Now, we're not that busy in our chat tonight, so it shouldn't be too difficult. But, it helps to create awareness. If we're in the middle of talking about something and I see a question, if I can get my act together, I'm going to highlight it onto the screen itself so that you know I've seen you, and we're going to continue with our thought process and we'll get back to the question. Comme ça. And I hope that everything is going to go smoothly tonight. I have a 12-second lag. All right, so what we've got going in the studio, 12 seconds later is what you see. Do not feel ignored, please. How is the maybe Aphrodite? There's your first question. Maybe Aphrodite.
Almost opening.
That's awesome.
First little bud is almost opening.
Okay, don't move her, don't jiggle her. I don't want this live stream to be the reason that there's bud blast. Please, no, please.
But I'm starting to see a flush of pink within it, so I'm thinking it's equestrus because my understanding is the Aphrodite should be all white.
Well, I don't know. Would you be disappointed?
I already have an equestrus, so I'd be mildly
Okay.
disappointed. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, but you know, to equestrus, I guess I could make babies.
Here we go again. More babies.
Yeah.
Okay, so Julie's Orchids, explain. Just give a little bit of an explanation about your grow spaces, so that people that don't know your channel pretty much have an idea about what we're going to be, where we're going to be headed with your thoughts of the pros and cons, and how we're going to bounce off each other tonight.
Okay, so I'm in Perth, Western Australia. So my climate in the summertime is exceedingly dry, hot, and the sun's rays are like little laser beams that burn everything. Wintertime is similar to Nina, cold, rainy, damp. For those reasons, and the fact that for whatever reason in Western Australia, the amount of pests that are outside in spring and fall are, in my personal experience of living, insane. So I grow everything in my home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a small 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that I share with my husband, and my bonus daughter comes a couple days a week. So I grow in 2 places in my home. The first place where I keep my higher humidity plants is my bedroom. I have an east-facing bedroom window, and I have my plants on the wall that receives that light furthest back away from the window as you can possibly get it. So I've got my bed between the two. And then the rest of my grow space is in my lounge room. I've got 2 different sets of shelves in my lounge room. So we very much so live with my plants in our main living spaces, because I don't keep any plants in my stepdaughter's bedroom. That's her space. And the office area, which is our 3rd bedroom, also does not have any plants in it. So we live with our plants. They're in the living room, they're in the bedroom, and that can create some interesting things depending on your
Right.
plant's light needs. So that's where it's really interesting that you can very successfully grow and flower orchids within your living space, as long as you and your housemates or husband or family are willing to put up with what you have to do it.
Right. And that's why I was so happy that you said yes to this pros and cons things, because you literally are living with them, and
Yeah.
they are not in a separate room. They are actually, as a matter of fact, even in your bedroom, which I find very, like, for me, I don't have plants in my bedroom at all. I used to have plants in my bathroom, but I'm hearing from you that you don't have any orchids or any plants in your bathroom. Is that just an assumption of mine?
Okay, I've recently mounted 2 orchids to try
Okay.
them on mounts.
Uh-huh.
I have a no ID fowl that I've been nearly killing, and I thought, I'm going to put on a mount. If it dies, it dies. If it doesn't, great. And then I have a very tiny Sterochilus laxa that I was getting root rot with, and it's one of those mini orchids. And I had it in a little tiny pot, and I was rotting its roots, so I stuck that on a mount, and I have those hanging on the outside of my shower surround in the
Right.
bathroom because it gets the humidity.
Right.
In the morning, I wake up, go into the bathroom, spray them. Pretty well anytime during the day that I'm home, I give them a mist. But other than that, if I'm working, they get sprayed in the morning and then sprayed in the evening, and that's it. Or they
All
just get the
right.
humidity from the bathroom.
All right.
That goes into why do I grow in my bedroom?
Well, that's good. That's, first of all, I wanted to talk about never mind the orchids, but you sent me an email, and I find this super important because I have not actually thought of this one. So humans living with their orchids in the grow space, and not just grow space, sorry, but in the bedroom. The humans, one of your major points, if you could elaborate on that, is the health improvement to you. Never mind what it's doing for the orchids, to you. I thought that was
Okay.
really interesting. So here's a pro. This would fall under the category of pro.
Pro. For me, in my climate, my relative humidity in my house when I first started checking humidity levels was 12 to 18%. I run a humidifier in the bedroom grow space. That's the only space that I run a humidifier is in the bedroom. And I get that in the summertime, I can get it and maintain 55%. In the wintertime, I can get it up to 65%. Now, here's the thing about humidity in humans, and particularly dry climates. Human respiratory system runs better with humidity levels about 50, 55%. So I've noticed in my bedroom, particularly sleeping at night, I'm waking up without the sore throat. I'm not
Okay.
snoring nearly as loud. I've noticed my skin isn't constantly bone breakingly dry.
Mm-hmm.
And same way with my hair. So it's made some positive impacts for me personally. I'm sleeping better.
Wow.
My skin feels nicer. My hair feels nicer. I'm not waking up with a sore throat. My husband's sleeping better because I'm not snoring as much.
Oh, wow.
Which I've been known to snore like a freight train. So bonus for that one.
Right.
Um,
Well,
and then,
that's a positive side effect, I would say, no?
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Would you have
So
done
I
that if you hadn't had your orchids? Would you have thought of it eventually, maybe, or did that
no, it
was
wouldn't
no?
have dawned on me.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. Okay,
And matter
interesting.
of fact, it was the addition of the humidifier, and several months later, going, I feel different. What's the change? And that's when I started looking into it and realized that not only do plants need a certain amount of humidity for optimum health, but so do humans.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah.
And so then there was another pro that I thought super interesting. Again, we're going to get into the orchid side of things, but we always speak what orchids do for us, psychologically, and how much joy they bring us. But you
Yes.
also
That's how I
mentioned
feel.
as a pro, cool mist humidifier. Okay. So as a pro, you also mentioned that it made you more productive?
Yes. Okay. My lights come on every morning at 7 a.m. Um, between the sun coming up in Perth in the summertime between 4:35 in the morning and filtering in through that east-facing window, even though we have our blinds down, by 7 a.m. my lights are on. Doesn't matter what day of the week it is, 7 a.m. those lights are on and you're awake. Whereas before I had my orchids, I would take the afternoon, or moment to say, I don't have to work today. I'm going to lie in bed until 10, 10:30. And yeah, no, the lights come on. You can lie in bed, but you're not sleeping or anything of that nature. So you're up, so I'm up 7 o'clock every day and I get my things going that I need to do. So it's nice because in Perth, if you can get up early and get some of your outdoor stuff done before the heat of the day comes in, that's a bonus because otherwise it doesn't get done. I can get a lot of the little piddly housework things done that it's hard to have the other people in the house awake with, like, let's say, cleaning the toilets.
Right.
Whenever it seems like people are awake and I want to clean the bathrooms, that's when everyone needs to take a bath, a shower, have a
Right.
toilet.
Right. Right.
So those little things have added to my ability to get stuff done. And again, if it hadn't have been for the orchids, Nina, I'd likely still be curled underneath my pillows in blankets and snoozing
Yeah.
away. But it's created a certain amount of discipline in my life that On the weekends, I was completely lacking because I don't have to work. I'm not going to get up. Why?
Right.
And it's not a bad thing, because before the orchids, I was, sort of sometimes struggling. Oh, I didn't get all the laundry washed this week that I wanted to get done, or I didn't get all of the house stuff, yard work done that I wanted to get done. And now that's a rarity.
Wow.
Mostly if I don't.
You see, for me, that would be fall under the category of it's a con. Back when I was working, Saturday and Sunday were religious, unless we were
Yeah,
going to the beach.
yeah.
Zip it,
Michelle has asked, do I put a couple
Yes.
of drops of hydrogen peroxide into the tank? No, I don't, Michelle. But what I do is once a week, I give it a good wipe down and wash out the humidifier.
Okay, that answers
And
that.
it's mostly because here in WA, hydrogen peroxide and alcohol, you can only get in little tiny small bottles.
I know, isn't it silly?
And they're ridiculously expensive. So I use those sparingly. But you can do the same thing, just once a week, or give it a good wipe out. That I'm finding that's really all it needs here. Keep your filters changed on them as you need.
Speaking of that, do you have very hard water, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to confirm that I wasn't assuming something that we had discussed.
I use the RO water in my humidifier.
Right. Okay. There you go. So you see,
and that helps.
Yeah. So you see those are the two perspectives that I find super interesting, and that's why I like live streams like this with another, form of input. I mean, I would not put plants in my bedroom simply because I'm selfish. And yeah, that's not happening. And my life, if I did have plants in my bedroom, let's say circumstances change and everybody has to move into my bedroom with me because I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment or something, then I would just say, okay, you'll get the lights on when I'm awake, and when I go to sleep the lights go off, you know what I mean? And then you get your extended daytime. But no way on a weekend would I then want to have. But I think it is a fantastic approach the way you take it and say, well, it works for me because I get this done, and it's like, ta-da, your life suddenly has become a little more smoother and you don't get annoyed with yourself.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Now there is a certain amount of I don't know if you want to call it a con, because the con has in my household self-remedied. So when the lights first went in the bedroom, my husband, being an academic, doesn't have the 9 to 5 sort of job, if you will. He can go in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon if he wants to. A lot of times his work is just done at home on research with people in Sweden or Japan or wherever he's working with. So for him, he was getting annoyed for the first 6-8 months of the collection it started in the bedroom.
Okay.
Because I want to sleep. But Dylan has since evolved to where I think he could sleep through air raid lights shining directly on him.
Okay. Well, there you go.
He's sleeping right now, and every light in that bedroom is on.
It's fantastic. I have to say that's pretty cool, because we talk about orchids adapting to our environment, whereas we're now adapting to theirs. That's wonderful. I like that. Okay, so here's the thing. You also had another thought in your email that you wanted to share. For example, you said something about lights, seeing as we were talking about lights. Mm-hmm. You have blurple lights, or do you have full spectrum?
Okay, the blurple lights, that's a thing. I started off with blurple lights.
Mm-hmm.
And they have an effect on me that I've heard other people talk about with the blurple lights, in that they eventually make me feel dizzy, just not really dizzy, but just not right, mildly nauseated, anxious, like I'm borderline needing to run the hell out of here. And so there's something within the light spectrum, because it took the blurple lights out of the main areas where we live. Now they're just pretty well feeding my house plants, which are on top of the refrigerator, and not exposed to them directly. So I found that when I turned the blurple lights off, that feeling went away. So I use full spectrum LED white light with all the color spectrums in them, as opposed to just the blurple lights, because just the blurple lights affect me on a physical way that I don't truly understand.
Right.
But it's enough that it's a turnoff.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting, because they don't affect me at all. I did buy the specific glasses for blurple lights back in the day, because if I was dealing with the shelf with the blurple lights, I was thinking, I don't want to have that. But it turns out when I went there, and instead of being there for 5 minutes, you know how it is, then you see something else and something else, la la la. Suddenly it extends to 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And then I walk away. The only effect that I see is I see more green when I look around the room.
Yeah.
When I walk into a normal space, all of a sudden everything has a hue of green. But I wasn't feeling the effects that you speak of, or how many other people do not like them. And I've never actually delved into, when people say I don't like blurple lights, and the question in my mind was always why. They're great for orchids. But now with the more modern and high tech and more pricier lights, you don't need to have the blurple lights, because it's all meshed in beautifully and well balanced. So you get a white light, and all the colors are there for what the orchid is doing. And I wasn't going to invest in that, but back in the day, I also thought if my orchids are in active growth, they go on that shelf, whereas the other ones that might be resting or coming into bud, they can go on the other shelves, So I was using two different kind of light setups in order to accommodate whatever. That was my thought process back in the day. But
see, now the blurple lights didn't seem to affect Dylan.
okay.
Eve said that they gave her a headache, my stepdaughter. But it wasn't that much for her, because at the time they were in the bedroom, and she doesn't really hang out in our bedroom much. But she said when she would come in there that she didn't like those. So if you do the blurple lights, buy one and run it. If you're doing it in your home, run it for a week or 2 or 3 in your general area to see if you notice any changes to your general way of feeling. Like I said, it just gave me a general feeling of almost needing to flee, and just something. It was a general feeling of something ain't right, and I can't put my finger on what is not right.
Okay. I see that, Michael. I agree, but you can't stand the way that it looks. And I got some goodies from my daughter. Hey, sweetheart. Hi, Mom. It's got a ribbon on it too. Cute. Anyway, I understand. Can't stand the way it looks, and obviously, if some people are filming, they've got the blurple lights on, then you can't really see or appreciate colors or leaf color, etc. And they do need other spectrum rather than blue and red. I agree on that as well. However, as you know, my setup has shop lights and then another rack with full spectrum lights, daylight plus blurple. So, I figured it would be pretty much balanced, but if something's coming into active growth, they went under the blurple as a priority in my space. But it's interesting that it doesn't affect everybody the same way. So aesthetics would be one reason why people probably aren't so partial when it comes to the blurple lights. Meanwhile, like I said, there's plenty of options out there on the market now that actually look even nice, and they radiate a white light. Okay, so go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about the humidifier in your bedroom, because if you have anything you want to expand and elaborate on when it comes to the living room space where you're at with the pros and cons, stop me at any time. This is not like a formal interview. It's just I want to make sure I don't miss out on any of your points that you emailed me. Okay.
Okay. So the plants in the lounge room, My husband will not allow me to run a humidifier in the lounge room because he bought one of those art TV things, um, a ridiculously expensive hang on the wall
Okay.
TV thing.
Yeah.
Which we don't watch much TV, so I thought it was a bit of a ridiculous purchase at the time. But it was not a cheap TV. And so he's afraid the humidity will affect the electronics in there, so he won't let me run
Right.
here. Now, with the way my house is designed, is the kitchen is right off the lounge room.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a lounge dining room that turned into a weird C kitchen sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we get the added benefit because also off of that is the second bathroom, and that's the one Eve uses. So whenever she showers in there, it gets humidity. We have to leave the door open so that that can kind of get out of there because there's no window in that bathroom. So that helps the humidity in this part of the house. And then anytime you're cooking,
Yes.
say boiling water, then that's aiding to the humidity at this side of the house. So this side of the house, without running the humidifier, in the summertime with those daily cooking sort of whatevers to this one. And Dylan is sometimes known, if he's gone to the beach real quick, because we have carpeting in the bedroom, that he'll go to the second bathroom here, because then he doesn't walk sand through the house. So he's gone surfing, then he'll shower in there. So the second bathroom shower gets used probably 4 times a week, 3-4 times a week. And again, the door stays open. So I'm able to keep relative humidity in here without the humidifier at about 40,
Right.
45. Yeah.
That's all right. That's all right.
Which is okay. So I have most of my don't need as much humidity plants out here, and all of my dendrobiums are out here. My no ID phalaenopsis are out here. Believe it or not, I've got my gracoids out here because they seem to do okay with it, but I have them set on the shelf that's closest to the kitchen and also in the direct line of the bathroom. So,
Well, so it actually works. Like even without a humidifier, you're just the ambient of the household and how it operates and who does what where. Just amplifies the humidity right then and there. That's cool. That's interesting. Some people would also have a decorative fountain maybe in their living space as well, just because, if they have the space, they have a little bit of a corner. I used to have one in my other property. I had a fountain, one of those indoor stone features that you could, that it runs within itself. It was gorgeous.
I have a pet bowl fountain thing that's for the pets.
Okay, that works.
Yeah. They like it better too. And then again, every one of the plants that I have out here is in semi-hydro. So we have that added bonus kind of helping.
The next phase would be the setup itself would also create a relative amount of humidity. So you're not using humidity trays to amplify anything. You get your humidity based on what the rhythm of the house.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
And it works.
Yes, and it's really cool because, if you're going to have orchids in your living room, we were also talking about that with Trisha's Orchid Life, you don't want anything to start to get a little bit moldy, or condensation on the windows or something. I mean, there's a limit to what you can do. So it's a pro to be able to work with what you've got in your environment, and you don't need to go into the humidifier. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But you're in a dry climate like yours, the humidifier in the bedroom doesn't cause any condensation on the window either, does it?
None. No.
Yeah.
No. The only time we get condensation on the window is if it's wintertime and you take a very hot shower and you leave the bathroom door open between the bathroom and that's it. And when that happens, then the humidity levels in the bedroom are like 90%. But that's why I started growing in the bedroom, because I knew that was going to get the most humidity, but I didn't realize how dramatically it dropped after your morning shower was over.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So how about thought leading on from your thoughts? What about airflow? What have you got? Have you got any kind of airflow happening, let's say, where your humidifier is? Because there could be pros and cons to having airflow for your orchids, which are kind of
Okay, so
impacting.
in the bedroom, I have on the grow space shelves, I have little fans about this big that hang on each shelf and aim at towards each other from one
Uh-huh.
side of the shelf to the other. Um, and then for the very top shelf, I have sitting on my headboard just a standard table oscillating fan that kind of covers the top shelves. I've recently added on the other side of the bedroom another tall oscillating fan.
Right.
I've noticed a huge difference since adding that fan. Now, for the lounge room, the only airflow it gets is the airflow of humans walking past it
Right.
and the ducted
Yes.
airflow coming out of the ceiling.
Okay. No negative
But
effects there at all. You don't see any pockets where it's a little bit too warm or that it's bothering you. The sound of the fans, maybe.
okay, I have tinnitus,
Okay.
so the sounds of the fan make the crickets stop in the ears. So I think they're fine; they don't bother me. Uh,
Okay.
Dylan took a little bit of getting used to the fans, but again, he's adapted.
All right.
But for me, I always like to have something running. Before I had the orchids, I always had YouTube running on just so that there was background noise. Because if there's no background noise, I have a cornfield of symphony of different crickets and bugs and bzzz going on in my ears. I have
Okay.
tinnitus real bad. Um, Now the bottom shelf underneath the TV.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, there's a TV. So that bottom shelf there,
Yeah.
I think I need to hang some little fans in there
Yeah.
because we don't walk across that area that much. Whereas the top shelves up there,
Yeah.
there's a ceiling vent that comes down, and whereas I do run the aircon, the heating, or this whole house fan all year long.
Right.
Like right now, it's fairly cool. I don't have the aircon running, but the whole house fan is running just to keep air moving. And part of the reason for that is I have a small house.
Mm-hmm.
My house touches my neighbors on one side and almost touches my neighbors on the other side. So there's two whole walls in my house where there are no windows at all. I have an east-facing bedroom window. I have a west-facing bedroom window and a west-facing kitchen window. That's all the windows I have in my house. Other than that, I've got two sliding doors to take me out to the back garden. So I don't get naturally a lot of airflow in this house,
Mm-hmm.
just due to how it's built, how small it is, which is why I constantly run the fan,
Yeah.
the whole house fan.
Well, that's
Yeah.
interesting. You see that that's also a good point that you make there. I deduce from that the fact that the size of where you're growing your orchids is also relevant with how much airflow you need to add when it comes to fans. Because
Yeah.
if you've got lights running, they will, to a degree, create some form of heat or dryness, so to speak. And you want to keep the air moving when it comes to not burning your leaves, etc. But you're not finding any negative impact with your fans in the bedroom. Doesn't bother you. Your orchids are doing fine. You're not seeing any areas drying out quicker than others, or because that could also be a con, in my opinion, and somehow the fans are set and there's always one little space that stays a little bit drier or warmer. Or how did you feel or
Um,
think around that one?
I move the plants around. So
Okay.
in the bedroom where my frags and my paths are at, they have the little round fans that just hang, and the fans were kind of pointing down at the plants a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just changed them to where they just blow across the top of them. Okay. but I was still finding the ones that were sitting very closest to the fans that were in smaller cups, smaller frags, that those were drying out quite quickly. So I just moved the larger ones to that area, and now that's not an issue.
Sorry, I hear you. I'm listening.
Yeah,
I'm trying. King was just being vocal.
yeah, it's
So,
okay.
but yeah, I heard you. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So the only thing that you would say, I know, Sharon Sun. Thank you so much for being here. Didn't want to
Morning,
interrupt.
Sharon.
Didn't want to interrupt Julie, but thank you, Sharon. It's good to see you. I hope that you are doing well in your beautiful, sunny, summery Australia. So yeah. So when it comes to Oh, no, I just had to mute Sandy. I'm sorry, I just had to mute because King was being vocal. He had a moan at my daughter because she shut the door on him. He wants to be there. Anyway, he gets to go on her couch in her living room upstairs. He doesn't get to do that downstairs, so yeah. But anyway, that's also interesting because when we talked about airflow earlier, now we're going to talk about lighting. Because of course we did speak about the pros and cons of the lighting, etc. But there was something that you mentioned in your email where it's a pro that we can have lights, and I'll weigh in on that with my opinion after I heard about your command strips. What would you like to
Oh,
share? Because
um,
if I may jump ahead, just if this is not the answer, think about what would you do differently if we don't get to that sooner. Just I don't want to forget to ask you that, but just
okay.
talk about your command strips if you want to share that.
Okay, so a lot of the light strips that I've purchased gave you an option for hanging, which was those screws or command strips.
Mhm.
Now, I went with the command strips because after 28 years of working as a sonographer, screwing motions hurt my wrists, and I still need to work, so I avoid screwing things as much as possible. So I use command strips, thinking, oh, command strips, they'll hang forever. What I'm finding with the command strips, and this is not just limited to my lights, this is everything I have in my house hung on a command strip. They last about 2.5 years, and then they fall off the wall. They don't fall off the thing they're stuck to. They fall off what they're, if you stick it on the light and then stick it on the ceiling, it'll stay stuck to the light, but it'll fall off your ceiling. If you stick it on a
Oh,
picture
okay.
and stick the picture on the wall, it's going to fall off the wall because the wall adhesive side doesn't work.
It'll weaken with
So
over time.
over time, it loses its stick. So I'm finding that these particular light strips that I've hung with the command strips that came with them are starting to fall.
Okay.
Now they've hung perfectly fine for 2 years. I've not taken them off and restuck them. They're in the same spot I put them. Haven't done anything to them. I've got the cables, anchored up and held up, so it's not the weight of the cables pulling them down.
Mhm.
It's the command strips, they just fall. So basically now what I'm doing is once a week when I'm watering the plants and I get a complete shelf emptied that has those lights on the underneath side of them, um, because I have the IVAR shelves from IKEA, I can take the shelf off, put it back on easily. So I'm just going to have to take the shelves off, use those little tiny screws. Thank God I saved them, and screw them in. Yeah, I got some Gorilla Glue double-sided tape, and I was debating on trying those, but I'm still worried that in 2 years I'm going to have to screw those things in anyway.
And
I'm getting to
besides, the command strips at least gives you an opportunity to test your lights if that's where you want them. Gives you that
yeah,
option without going through all the trouble prior to setting them and as in a definitive place. Would you
yeah.
say that that worked for you? You wouldn't be changing anything now after the 2 years. You've liked the way they've done. It's okay to screw them in. Whereas before it might have been a great way to experiment and then be flexible enough to move them.
Yeah, so if you get the lights with the command strips and the little screws, use your command strips to figure out where you want them on the shelves and then screw them in.
Okay.
Don't rely on command strips to hold them for any longer than 2.5 years.
Okay. So I'm sorry I interrupted you there. You were going to say something to Sharon about the double-side tape from the hardware store, and you
Yeah,
were.
I bought some Gorilla Glue double-sided tape from Bunnings,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got some other things that aren't lights hanging, like pictures, and I'm waiting to see how they do. Now, I am prepping the wall with the prep like you're supposed to, and it doesn't matter if it's going on a painted wall, it's going on a masonry wall, it's going on wood shelves. In
Stainless
2.5 years, the command strips fail in my
Okay.
house. In
Okay. Right.
Yeah,
Interesting. Super, super interesting. Because I
yeah.
like that idea a lot, because if I were to ever expand my lighting, I was thinking of putting lights under my stainless steel shelves,
Hmm.
underneath for the shelf below, because I do
Hmm.
have, yes, I have light coming in from that little terrace door, but not during the summer when the sun is so high in the sky. And I have darker pockets for, let's say, the complex Phalaenopsis hybrids that have to stay inside, but I would like them to get more light. So I was actually thinking of taping, under the shelves, but it's very interesting to hear what you said about that. It never occurred to me. Carol, Stuff, welcome. It's good to see you. Hey, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's awesome.
Now they
So,
might adhere better and longer to the stainless steel. That's one thing I don't have them hung on.
okay.
Yeah, maybe figure out a magnet way to hold them with the steel.
Magnets is also something that I've seen a
Yeah.
lot that, you just clip them on, but I haven't seen them here available in Spain, but I've seen them online in the US. It's just like
Mm.
pop, pop. Usually,
Yeah.
usually it comes with a whole rig of a shelf and etc. that has the shelving plus the lights and everything, and it all sort of just fits beautifully together. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So when we're talking about lights, you have full spectrum, and you said you had them on the timer, and I think the timer is a massive pro, right? It's a huge
Yes.
benefit to put you don't have to think about it. The orchids get the light that they need, and you just, you walk away, and it's pretty much it just serves itself, so to speak. No
Yeah.
work.
The only thing you have to worry about if there's an outage, then you have to reset them. But yeah, it takes a lot of the work of that on and off.
Hmm.
Particularly when you have as many lights that you might have to turn on and off as I do.
Yeah.
Um,
So yours
yeah, so
aren't daisy chained to one
some of them
switch?
are some of the lights can be daisy chained,
Okay.
but my higher wattage lights, I have about 2 foot long, 80-watt LED light strips that are on their own plug-in, and I have those plugged in. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 of those, and where I can, I have them all plugged into a shared power strip. But no, not all of my lights daisy chain.
Okay. Because for me, the pro with regards to the indoor grow space is to be able to. I just loved flipping two switches and the lights were on, because I connected them to the electric sockets of my home. So I
Mm-hmm.
knew which ones would fire up my shelves. That was awesome, on
Yeah,
and off.
yeah,
So I didn't use a timer, but I've been hearing that, obviously not just hearing, but it makes sense to put them on a timer, and then you don't have to think twice about them. But yeah, no, I just switched them on and off. I wasn't climbing over finding individual switches. And I
no, I've
love
got
that about being able to switch lights on. First
yeah,
of all, as a pro, it just guarantees it's going to be okay, no matter what's going on
yeah,
outside.
yeah. Now Michael was saying that they've got the smart plugs, which I guess I've seen them, but I was like, what the heck is that? Because I've only seen them in IKEA, and when I'm in IKEA, I'm ready to get out of IKEA. So I just have the old-fashioned manual
Hmm.
um, timers. They work fine,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
So I think maybe my husband has finally given me permission
Nice.
to add some more shelves because with the new batch of babies I have,
Yes.
I need. Um, so I'm going to look at that because I have to go to IKEA to get my shelves. So while I'm at IKEA, I'm going to go ahead and buy one of those
Yeah.
smart light things that he's talking about, and I might make the change because he was, I think, also mentioning, Michael, maybe you can clarify on this, that there's an app you can use with those
Yes.
smart things.
Yeah. Yes. You've got them
Yeah.
on your app. Yes. They're awesome.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
good fun. Just never
Because
lose your
sometimes,
phone.
sometimes I'll come home from work and say there's a lot of construction going on around my area, and every now and again there's planned outages so that they can do, an addition onto the Mitchell Freeway or something that affects our area. And then you come home and it's like, okay, every light's off now. I have to get it
Yes.
reset and be going,
Yes.
which can be difficult because I've got some of my lights are set up because some of them are the strips and they have just 2, 4, or 8 hours or 8, 12, or 16-hour run times on their USB things. So I've got some that I have to actually physically turn on at 11:30. So if the power goes out, say on a Wednesday, those plants that run underneath those lights that I need to turn on 11:30 for their augmented light are screwed until Saturday.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think, yeah. I like anything techie. Put an app on my phone, I'm all over it,
Yeah.
but it and then you have to think it drains the battery and blah blah blah. Don't lose the phone. Make sure you've got a backup. Make sure you know your times or whatever could go wrong. The minute you put too much trust into one part of technology, it's almost like, well, but that's just me. That's just me with all my thought processes. But yeah, I like that. And it's also neat. It's tidy, you just have this one thing without something looking a little bit clumsy, especially for when you're living with your orchids. If it looks smart, it's clean, it's put away. It makes the whole aesthetics of the area look really nice as well.
Yeah. Figuring out how to hide the light cords
Yes.
it's become an art form and a form of contortion in some.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you, like in my case, if I could plug into the electrics of the house and I took the one halogen light off and everything runs through the stucco around the perimeter of my dining room. And then, of course, the cables, as they go up, they were rather a large clump. So I taped glitter masking tape around it, gray glitter.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Just to hide the aesthetics. But just like with your command strip lights, it's starting to unravel because it's been 4 years.
Yeah, that's the only problem with the so I've used the zip ties.
Oh yeah,
And I
you
zip
have to
tie
zip tie them
light,
together. Yeah,
I zip tie them to the frame the frame of the shelves as I can towards the areas to keep them as tidy as possible.
Right. Well, yeah. You have to zip tie them, make them into a bunch, but also not that tight because they can't heat up being so close next to each other. The cables have to somehow allow them to breathe. I just took some decorative. I bought it at the Dallas Cowboys in Texas at the stadium because they had exactly the gray glitter that I wanted, and I just love Dallas Cowboys were always my thing, and I used that tape to make it look a little bit more pretty. But yeah. So there's another thing that with regards to light about burning the leaves, I would say it's a pro. We can dial in our lighting to the point with the positioning of the orchids that we don't burn the leaves, but we also can risk, it's a con, because we get too comfortable maybe, and then, we put orchids where they're supposed to, and we walk away thinking everything's set up, living la vida, off we go. And we come home, and then it was a little bit of a mishap because 14 hours or 13 hours of persistent light on a space and we burn our leaves. So have you had any experience with regards to moving into the con side of lighting with regards to burning leaves as such, or?
Yes, as they fall, they're still on, and they fall onto the plants and cook the crap out of them. Um,
Oh
I've
yes,
also had,
okay, because the light,
yeah,
the command strips dropped on the
yeah,
leaves. Okay.
and I've also had, you get this where you get a plant, it fits in the shelves, you think you have the shelf high enough for the next few growths, and then all of a sudden the next year puts out a growth that, what the hell happened to you, it's 6 times bigger, and you don't realize as it's growing, and all of a sudden you look down and it's grown into your light and has damaged it. I had that happen not with my orchid, but with my Sacrosinia pitcher plants.
Mm-hmm.
The one pitcher it grew was this much bigger than the rest of them, and it's sealed. This pitcher is sealed shut because it grew directly into a light,
Okay.
and it grew within a week. That big, it seemed like it was that, because it's like, wait a minute, you weren't like this last
Wow.
time I watered you, and now what's going on? Um, so that's a con of indoor grow space growing, is once you get big plants, keeping them fitting in your shelves is difficult.
Yeah.
Um, and then, whereas you might be able to get them to fit in your shelves, that your lights are so high up that it's really won't get any of the other plants that you might have on that shelf.
Right.
Um, and then again, you're dealing with the growth width-wise, you'll again run out of room on your shelves.
Yeah.
Um, so you have some limitations there, which means for me, as some of my plants get bigger and more mature, yes, I am going to add some more shelves. I am not going to buy any more orchids to put on those shelves. The shelves I'm adding are for just the eventuality that I'm going to need more space for what I've got, because they're going to grow bigger and they're not going to fit within the spaces that I already have, because I'm an orchid pig and I've filled them up already and didn't keep in mind that I need growing room.
All right. Here's the thing. When I did my lighting, I was thinking this is going to look crazy for the longest time. But at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, it didn't take a year, and we are dialed in, you know, because it looked
Yeah,
so silly that my top bar was right at the ceiling and my shelf was like 1.5 meters below that. Put
yeah,
in a 60 centimeter orchid, and you are just about there, and then have that
yeah,
one grow to size, and you are right there, you know.
yeah.
So it looked
And then if
really,
you get
really,
bigger,
I mean, my Ancelias, I think I've got pygmies, but should I ever need them, they can also go right up there on the top, because there's still room for them to move. And then, of course, like when I'm outside on the east shelf, even though that's my outdoor thing, you can see that some shelves are so ridiculously outspaced. And for someone like me that likes uniformity, it drives
yeah,
me nuts that my
yeah,
shelves aren't evenly spaced, you know, just from the visual of it. But there is
yeah,
a reason. You have to really accommodate and think about, if you're going to use your top shelf for orchids, how much space have you got between your orchids and the ceiling? You may not want to put the tall ones on the top. If you don't have
yeah,
that height, you may want to opt for maybe Paphiopedilums or something, or the little tiny slipper orchids that you can get that don't grow tall. Those
yeah,
could be on the top. And you know, when you see something online and you're watching videos or something, don't look at what they have, how they've positioned their orchids. Look at where the light is and the distance from the leaves is, like ceiling, shelf, 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 you know, if you're going to
yeah,
expand to the top shelf, which
yeah,
most of us
yeah.
normally end up doing anyway.
See, what I'm finding is my highest light orchids are tending to be my taller orchids,
Hmm.
and those are the ones that get the 80-watt bars. And I'm finding that, again, for human comfort level, the lower those bar are to the floor, or less at eye level they are for you, the more comfortable it is in the living space. So my tallest plants are actually sitting on my floor in my living room grow space, the really tall dendrobiums that I have. Um, and that just makes it easier, because if you're walking by and right at eye level, that 80-watt bar is there,
Hmm.
that that's painful. So I keep um, the highest wattage or intensity lights lower to the ground, and I
Interesting.
keep my 20-watt lights up higher at your eye level. It's just much easier on your eyes.
That's interesting. Okay, take note. Never thought of it that way. I was always looking at what is convenient for the orchids, and I will work around that. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you can, just take note of that. And if you're listening, that your eye level might be, it could be interesting to do the opposite from what I just mentioned. But as long as your orchids do not get too close to the lights, that the fact that the taller ones should be lower. Super interesting. I like
And
that thought.
that's just for the lights, and it's just the intensity of the lights for comfort of your eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Trisha's Orchid Life, it's good to see you. Welcome, Orchid Ninja Trish-san. I have highlighted your comment. Go ahead and ask your question, okay? Just go ahead, because I'm highlighting comments as they come, even while we're talking, so that people know I have seen them. Nobody needs to be ignored, feels ignored here, all right? Thank you for hitting that like button. Yes, Michael, I appreciate that. Heads up to everybody. I appreciate a like. That would mean a lot to me. Thank you. Michael McCarthy says, if I could hang a light from the ceiling, I mean, I could, but I don't want to drill holes. Oh my God, I could grow so many more plants. Okay. All right, Trish. Gotcha. Yes. Well, maybe there's a designated space where you might think a light could go. Maybe. Right. So we've talked a little bit about lights. Always throw in your opinions and your comments about your personal experiences as well, because again, at the beginning, you will always see my intro. This is interactive. All right. Just as nice to have a guest on that brings a different perspective, different thought processes as well. But if you have suggestions in the comments, please feel free to add them. I will highlight them so that even people on replay can see different opinions, okay? Now, so we've done with the thing with the lights, but here's another pro that I liked. I really enjoyed with lights, and I find this is a huge pro, that all my mature blooming size orchids that were scheduled to bloom during the winter months bloomed without fail. Unless, of course, I was dumb enough to break a spike or do something. Now I'm tiptoeing. Now I'm like, are you? Aren't you? Now I'm like, oh, okay. Well, if you're not, if you're not, yay! At least then you'll rest. And I'm making all these kind of positive affirmations towards myself. But it was so much fun. The first years and the winters, and I could have this. My indoor blooming alley was for real, so much fun.
And that's the good thing about growing indoors in the controlled environment, is that you control the photo period. You just have to do a little adjustment on your timer, maybe your app, maybe on a Saturday change it from a 16-hour photo period to a 12-hour, and then knock it down again, and then knock it back up, because you can control all of that. What I'm finding is that I'm kind of going along with just the normal seasons. As I notice it's getting longer outside daylight hours, I go ahead and hit the little timers, because I do have the choice. I think I have 6, 8, and 12 on one set of strips, and I have 8, 14, and 16 on the other set. So I'm adjusting the times that they come on. So with the ones that I'm setting now at summertime to come on at 11, when it becomes more fall wintry, those will be coming on earlier in the day and shutting off earlier in the day.
Right.
So you can even still give them that.
Exactly, and that's why I highlighted Michael's comment here as well, because it's quite true. If you don't allow other orchids to get lesser light, then they'll get stressed and might not bloom at all. And that's why I also wanted to add and weigh in on that comment, Michael, that let's just say the Cattleyas or the Cattleya hybrids, and well, my Gracoids thankfully do bloom. I'm just not getting double spikes anymore, but they always bloomed. I didn't have an issue with the ones that were scheduled to bloom, because I had this constant lights on. So that for me, that was the fun part. So I miss it a little bit, but I'm only in year 2 of my dark winter, so I need another 2 or 3 seasons. I'll get used to this, but it was
Yeah,
like
yeah,
like when I introduced my channel, I said this is my indoor blooming alley, and during the winters, that was in the summer of 2020, and I was my indoor blooming alley, and well. 2020, okay. And I
yeah.
can't really brag about my indoor blooming alley anymore. So having
Yeah, I
lights
can
is
say
really, really something when it comes to getting your orchids to bloom on time.
for me, I probably wouldn't have my number of orchids and lights if it weren't for the solar panels on the house.
Another good thing as well. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
In my
So
previous property, I had solar panels, but that was to run the jacuzzi.
yeah,
So,
we
yeah,
got
yeah.
very lucky here about 4 years ago. The Western Australian government had an incentivizing program for certain suburbs to do rooftop solar so that we can feed back into the grid. So we were able to get rooftop solar put on the house to feed back into the grid for half the cost that it would have been normally, thanks to this government grant thing.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like I said, if it weren't for the solar up there, I couldn't likely afford to run
Yeah.
um, at least as many of those 80-watt bars as
Yeah.
I'm running.
Yeah.
And I'm actually, they've got a new solar rebate thing going now where they're um, helping homeowners within the city limits um, to go solar and batteries. So we're trying to check to see if we qualify for that incentivization program. We don't know if they roll it out in areas. So I think right now they're trying to roll that one out in the more country regional areas versus the city areas. But there's fingers crossed that they get, the batteries to help subsidized by the government as well here. That would be fantastic.
That's going to be
Yeah.
amazing. That is going to be
Yeah.
amazing. So let me see. I've got a few more notes here. We've gone through your points. We're getting more into the brainstorming side of things. I have a pro here that I used to enjoy a lot more than I do now, and I'm not going to elaborate on the reasons, but I love that the orchids are all consolidated in one area, and it makes for quick and efficient checks that all is okay. I used to find that so soothing to be futzing around in and amongst trying to turn very, very carefully if there was something behind me I wasn't aware of, keeping
Yeah.
people out of my space because they don't have the 360-degree awareness. But to have them all in one place, it makes it very easy to check for all things that could be going wrong, shouldn't be going wrong. How do you feel about that? Do you like it?
I do. Particularly, I don't know, I call it green therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you wake up in the morning and you turn the alarm off because my alarm is on the side of the bed where the shelves for the orchids are. So and then you look up and there's all your beautiful orchids there. And then, you come home, change your clothes after work. You can give a quick look through to see how everybody's doing. Really quick, come down the hallway. There's that little corner shelf as you round the kitchen, going either into the kitchen or down into the lounge room. Have a quick look through everybody there, make sure, there's not some
Yeah.
weird thing going on that wasn't. And then if you're sitting on the lounge, you can't not see the corner shelving
Yeah.
that's back there.
Yeah.
So, and even the plant growing all over.
Yeah.
Well, so for me, it's the same way. It is meditative.
Yeah.
You wake up, you get the nice green, the beautiful green. You can take that moment to just kind of fuss through them,
Yeah. Or
talk to
brushing your
them.
teeth.
Oh, yeah, I do. I brush my teeth and I spray the ones in the bathroom. Talk to them, because my mom always talked to her plants. She had plants like this, but they weren't orchids. And she always would talk to them. Oh, how you doing? And what are you doing over here? And she swore that talking to them was good. So I talk to my plants. Maybe people think I'm crazy.
Nope.
I'll give
Not at all.
one negative to growing in a house with a window, like my bedroom. So sometimes during the daytime, I leave my bedroom window open after the morning death rays come in, to where it's just bright light to augment my lights. And so let's say on a Saturday afternoon, I'm sitting in bed watching my ninja orchids, and I'll see someone walk by, and you get a lot of voyeurs that look in the window. And I've been out at say the local grocery store, and I'll have someone, oh, are you the one that lives on the corner of so and so and this and that street, and what are all those plants you've got in your bedroom? Oh, those are orchids. Oh, I walk my dog past there, and I just peek in your bedroom windows whenever you have them open because they're so beautiful.
Wow.
So
Wow, I hadn't thought of that.
yeah, I hadn't thought of that either, but now I really make it a point, because I know my neighbors are looking. Again, this is going to go back to, I make my bed every day.
Right.
So I don't know what neighborhoods are like where you guys are at. Here in Perth, we've got a pretty well standard house neighborhood, not a housing estate. And you got people walking around with their dogs, and most of the people here are very kind and friendly and will sit and chat with you. But to literally be at the grocery store and have someone that you don't know nail down where you live and then say what plants are those you're growing, that's kind of weird. But not.
Well, this is something that surprised me in the States, because here everything is pretty much walled off. You have a fence or cypress hedge around you, or you're in an apartment building that is a sealed off community with a gate. When I went to the States, the front yard is wide open, and then you have a little bit of in the back fenced off, or a lot fenced off, but everything towards the front is open, meaning you could be in your dining room, your study, or whatever, and depending how close your property is to the sidewalk, it's like, hey, hello, awkward, and then that's why people have their blinds down a lot in the States. And I'm like, I need light. I need fresh light. Open them flipping blinds, So
well, here in Perth, it really depends on where you're at. So most of the big apartment complexes are gated communities. There are housing estates that you have the big American front yards and all through. And then you have I'm in an older area of Perth. So it's an older neighborhood, about 20 minutes outside of the CBD. And my house was because I built it because they tore down another house that was sitting on a massive, huge lot. And they broke that up into 3 lots. And so most of these would be like your older American neighborhoods, smaller, we would call them Weller homes, 3x2 slab construction houses with the open front yards and the fenced in backyards. But if you go to the older areas of Perth, right outside the CBD, now those are going to be those really nice character homes with the big gates and the huge stucco coverings, and that you walk in and it's instant, you're in Bali, kind of thing. Yeah. But there again, those properties go for $2.5 million.
Right.
My property does not.
Well, here, this is just very interesting. Your privacy could be impeded if you've got a great collection and people are like, oh, hello. That's, I just find it odd that people would be that invested to approach. The only thing I was asked when I had my lights on for the first year, that after we had moved in, my neighbors asked me if what's going on with they thought it was super interesting to have this pink glow come out through the hedge at them, and because they're on the other side and they could see this. Well, it looks a little bit like a board. Yes, but here it would be, they were more along a bordel, for where the ladies offer their services.
The red light district. Gotcha. Yes. Okay.
So,
I initially had the neighbor guys across the street from me when I first started doing the orchids. They were FIFO, they fly in, fly out guys. So there are some tradies that work in the mine site. And one day I was there working outside in the garden, and the guy walks up and he's like, what are you doing over there? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I doing over here? Working in the garden. He goes, no, 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 in your bedroom. What are these lights? And I'm like, why? And he
Oh.
goes, well, I'm looking for something. And I'm like, oh, those are,
Oh.
um,
Oh.
cannot help you with that. But he thought I was
Okay.
um, a grow house.
Right.
Mm,
Yes. Okay.
yeah,
Oh, goodness me. Anyway, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So then I became paranoid. Being an American, I'm like, oh my God, there's helicopters flying over. Am I going to get raided by, the DEA? And I wait a minute, no, the Australian Federal Police wouldn't do that here. Just for grow light, they'd actually look into it before they raided your house.
Right.
But yeah, I was a little bit worried initially when I first got the lights of perhaps attracting attention for the wrong reasons, because um, every single one of the grow lights that I have, the very first statement it made on the instructions was it's suitable for the propagation of cannabis.
Right. Well, the thing is that
So
here in
I see
Spain,
with those grow lights, if it says cannabis, they grow orchids well.
yes, exactly. And this is the thing that, seeing as there's not much, culture here with regards to orchid growing hobby to the degree that I do, um, to my understanding, I don't have anybody within 3 miles of me that has something that I have without saying I grow orchids and they have 2 or 3 phalaenopsis.
Yeah.
So I have to access these kinds of shops, and I'm talking orchids, and here comes grandma, moi, walking
Yeah.
in like, hey, I need, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
So I
that
get my plants from the head shop as well. I'm just calling them the head shop
yeah,
because you go in there and very obviously they're set up for
yes,
hydroponic growing of cannabis
right.
um, and other flowering plants.
So anybody
But
listening to this, anybody on replay, if you're struggling and you're not entirely sure where to get your supplies for your orchids, you
go to the
know,
head shop.
yeah, check your area for anybody that has a hydroponic store that is more targeted towards cannabis growing, and you will find everything that pretty much the majority of us use for our
Your
orchids
pH
there
up,
as well.
pH down, your CalMag, your
Even
fertilizer,
your
your
even your I got my TDS meter there, my pH meter, I got everything there when I started out. And
yeah,
I would have loved to have used their leca, but it was disgusting. It was terrible quality. It reeked of paraffin.
mm,
So, if you're looking for supplies locally, that would be the way to go. If not, if you prefer to shop online, then definitely going down the cannabis route is the way to go, and you can't go wrong. The only thing is, of
yeah,
course, do not use the instructions, the labels as per your orchids. Use them as per TDS meters and pH meters, okay?
yeah,
That's the only difference. Don't follow those instructions to a T. You got to have your little kits, your little gadgets there, because we are dosing way lower than anything that beautiful grass. I won't
yeah,
say the word because it might get banned from YouTube, but that gorgeous grassy stuff that has lots of buds on it,
yeah, yeah.
stuff that I'm not partial to. It makes me feel
Yeah,
funny.
and it might be easier for people in the States because my understanding is it's been decriminalized.
Yes,
I'm not sure
some
about
states, some states.
Europe.
No, well, you Holland.
Yeah,
No, you
yeah,
can't be doing anything like that
yeah.
at home. I suppose
So
you
I
can
know
grow
that
one plant supposedly here in Spain for personal use, but who can control that?
I
It's a
think that's how
blanket.
it is here in
It's
WA
a
as well.
blanket. Don't do it. You won't get in trouble if you don't do it.
Yeah, I
There's
think
no
that's how it
gray
is.
area when you just don't do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So just
Okay.
kind of keep your eyes peeled if you're buying lights and you want the white full spectrum. If they mention cannabis suitable for, because
Yes.
I got mine off of Amazon and eBay, and it did say that on the actual website and in the paperwork inside. Then you're right on the money.
Right. So
Yeah.
I have another pro here, pro thought, not from a pro, but as a thought. How about temperature regulation? Isn't that a pro, that it's always constant, that you can keep it at constant level, depending again on the orchid that you're growing? Let's just stick with
Not
the ones that grow indoors that don't need a cool down, because that would then turn into a con. You would have to find a way to cool orchids down in order to get them to bloom. But as a pro, I think the
it,
temperate,
that's a double-edged, yeah, it's a pro and a con. So if you have nice constantly maintained temperatures, your hybrid phalaenopsises are not going to bloom because they need the cool down. But your catasetinae, now I'm struggling with my catasetum because I didn't give it the slowdown it needed to start putting it into dormancy at the correct time last year.
right.
I didn't move it from the shelf and put it closer to the window so it could cool down. I didn't do any of that. I completely brain farted it. So if you're growing indoors, you need to avoid those kind of plant catasetinae unless you're going to set an alarm or somehow remember that you need to change their conditions dramatically. Now the hybrid phals, come wintertime here, we managed to get just enough of a drop in temperature,
Right.
even with the air and whatnot running, because it does get quite cool here,
Yes.
8, 9, 10, 11 C overnight, and sometimes cooler. And the husband likes it cooler to sleep at night, so I guess that's good for us anyway. So that's a non-issue. But really, the catasetinaes are the ones that I'm struggling with, and that's a grower mistake from growing indoors because I did not go, oh shit, it's raining outside. I need to start making this thing go to sleep because it's
Yeah.
coming into winter. And I told myself last year, oh yeah, when it starts to rain, that's when you start, reducing the water. And
Hmm.
no, didn't remember to do that until I'm like, wait a minute, you should be a lot more dormant than you are right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So I think likewise now I'm suffering it should be a lot bigger than it is right now for my time of the year. And I think I might have completely goofed it up so much. I don't know that it's going to recover from this because it started its growth. The growth put out roots and then it stalled and didn't do anything for a month and a half. And then it put out another set of roots, but it still hasn't grown any bigger.
Mm.
I don't know what to do with it. So the first set of roots are about, 5 inches long. I'm slowly watering it from the bottom. And since I've started doing that, I've noticed that we are starting to get some leaf formation.
Right.
But again, at this time of the year, it should already have its full growth there and waiting to go
Yeah.
dormant.
Well, the thing is
As
that if they are out of sync, let's just say we tangent alert, tangent
Yeah.
alert. But if we do something, let's just say we get an orchid in, it's the same thing with acclimating them to our grow space. So until they haven't acclimated, they may not perform. They may perform out of season. They may perform out of whack. In as well as if we make a mistake, let's say forget to cool them down, and then they feel like they've got 365 days of growth.
Yeah.
If we then they have to reset as well.
Yeah.
So whatever your catasetinae is doing now, keep it going. If it's growing,
Yeah,
and
that's
it
what I'm
grows,
doing.
yeah, just keep
Yeah.
it growing. Eventually, it'll dial itself in, and it may take another full season to do so. It may even just go dormant on its own accord now because it's got its mojo back, and your growth may end up being smaller, but the next one will go better.
Okay.
You see,
Yeah.
yeah, you see, okay, I'm just gonna let that stand because I have an opinion
Yeah.
about that, but I personally do not agree with that. Fred Clark or not, I don't agree with that, but anyway, it's yeah, okay. So moving on, we did the temperature regulation, but I just want to complete that thought because for me it was a positive. Being able to regulate my temperature, because temperature drop also is very relative because like you say, unless we crank our whole environment up to silly kind of temperatures, if I have 35 degrees Celsius in my grow space during the summer and then fall hits and it drops to 20 degrees indoors, I need to keep my orchids at a happy 20 degrees. My
Yeah.
cold, my complex phalaenopsis will spike because that is a radical drop in temperature, even though it's still nice and warm for the rest of the orchids. So my whole thing was just be able to regulate the temperature during the winter. It was always 20 degrees. It was awesome. Sometimes the nights I'd let them go to 17, but if the outdoors was really cold, I would be able to bump up and maintain a steady temperature indoors. I absolutely loved that. It was, for me, absolute luxury. I thoroughly enjoyed that completely. Now, the cold growers, those are the things where you need a plan B in place. If especially when it comes to species, I find they are the ones that will tell you what you're doing wrong. If you have a species, my aphyllum wouldn't drop its leaves if I left it indoors at 20 degrees Celsius. So those are the kind of things that you then have to take into consideration and move those kinds of orchids into another room, still give them enough light, but one that isn't heated. But in general, if we're talking about 80% of the collections that we have, the temperature regulation for me is an absolute pro. The con can then come in if we can't quite dial in and get our temperature drop balances right for orchids that need them. But they are normally, when we talk about a general collection, let's say there's 10 or 15% of those orchids that need the temperature drop. The rest of them, with 20 degrees, they're just happy as Larry, and indoor grow spaces can give you that in space. Loved it. And then I also wanted to discuss, we did the humidity regulation. I wanted to also ask about any thoughts on heat mats, just a side thought, because indoor growing, it's really cool to be able to use heat mats. In my opinion, I used to think that was an absolute positive. It's a definite pro for me, especially if we've got shelves like mine, for example. And yes, every shelf had a light above it, and I didn't have the clear covers, let's say, to stop any kind of dripping, etc. I used my heat mats on every single shelf all the way down. Oh, amazing stuff I've got stored away. But anyway, and they helped not only provide heat to the root systems, sometimes you didn't need to heat the room, simply because the root systems, the root balls were all nice and warm. You could regulate those as well. And they also served their purpose. Instead of, if there's a spillage or something, nothing drips down lower onto the next shelf into a crown of an orchid below. My opinion, heat mats are awesome when growing indoors. And I don't know if Julie's still with me, but any thoughts?
I don't have any heat mats.
Okay.
I'm not planning on getting any heat mats.
Right. You don't see the need.
I find that those 80-watt bar lights do create a fair amount of heat, and it does tend to act as a warmer for the shelf it's attached to.
Yes. Okay.
So
that's perfect. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think I stumbled on that one by pure luck.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Now I do have a friend of mine here that lives further north from me, and she does some growing in a greenhouse, a glass house, and some in her house. But she's got heat mats, and she's using those mostly for her flasks.
Yes.
Kind of to maintain a temperature around her flasks, because she has those in her house, and she keeps her house quite a bit more air conditioned cold than I do.
Okay. Because that was going to be my next thought. My seedlings absolutely loved their heat mats during the winter. They loved it. So, but
yeah,
you mentioned that your lights were are the ones providing that cover.
Yeah, yeah, and I do have most of my. Okay, the fowl babies that I have aren't growing on warmed shelves, but the Acioclades that I have are growing on warmed shelves, and they seem no different one way or the other. I have got some of the new fowl babies that I've just opened up, the Texas Mist and the Sweet Memories. I've moved those onto the shelves where they get the warmth from the underneath, and I believe that that's made a difference for them.
Right.
But it's a bit too early to tell.
All right. Okay. So I also have another one. This could be, let me know if you want to come back on camera and I'll just drop the visual video that I'm showing right now, Julie. Okay. If
I'm
you,
just making myself a coffee.
all right. Yeah. I'm just throwing the video up there so that there's no bubbles there.
Yeah.
Either way, just another little tangent here. Guys, I wanted to be on camera tonight, even though I'm somewhat sitting in the dark, but I managed to get my talking to my daughter's fabulous proper Canon camera. And Dum Dum here thought that once I had established all of that and logged out of my studio here in the background, that it would reset to webcam as in from my desktop. And no, the system is still connected, still is, the setting is with the camera, the Canon. So I'm sorry, that was a bit of a dud on my part. I didn't put that together. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about the pros of an indoor grow space and pests. What are your thoughts on that? Are there any pros? Because
Grow space and pets.
pests, as in not not the four-legged ones, but the 8 or 12 or 25-legged carkins.
Okay. For me, growing indoors,
Mm-hmm.
the pest situation is mitigated a lot. Outside, like, okay, now I've lived in Panama, Belize, Guatemala, 18 to 20 states within the United States of America, and now Australia. I have never seen biblical plagues of pests before in my life. Moving here, we get them every year. Go outside in spring and you cannot see your rose bush because it is absolutely covered in whitefly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have your elephant ear, 6 foot tall, 4 foot wide elephant ear plant eaten to half its size in 2 days from caterpillars that just miraculously appear out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I come in indoors. Now, I recently had a terrifying, last weekend, I had a terrifying, oh my God, I have spider mites moment.
Yikes.
Because I was noticing all these little webs. Oh my God, I've got a massive infestation of spider mites. Oh God. So last weekend I sprayed everything. And then I found what was not spider mites, but we have, the little black house spiders.
Yes.
One of them made babies.
Reproduced.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
all their little baby spiders are making themselves at home in my orchids, and those were the webs. Now, the webs on these little tiny spiders and these little black house spiders look similar to spider mite webs, except for that I'm also finding them in places that are not on plants. So that's why I'm
Okay.
saying I don't have spider mites,
Right.
because I've got, yes, better than the funnel web spiders. So I've got, and I've seen them now. I've seen 2 or 3 of the little baby. Okay, that's what's doing this. And then I found the cocoon. Is it a
Mm-hmm.
cocoon?
Yes.
And so yeah, I have much happier to say that I have a house full of helpful spider mite, or helpful little tiny baby spiders that are building their webs in my house as just regular house spiders, but their webs here look different than, say, the house spiders you'd get back home. Very irregular, very thin, and you really can't see them unless they get dust on them. And then you're like, oh, crap.
Okay.
So I've noticed that I've got a whole bunch of them. So basically what I'm doing now is every time I'm watering, I'm taking everything off the shelves and I'm wiping them down, because I can't say that I have a real keenness to have that many little spiders in my house.
Right.
I get a lot of daddy longlegs.
Mm-hmm.
The daddy longlegs, again, I'm fine with those spiders.
But they're not attacking your orchids.
No, but they're building their webs on or around the orchids.
Right.
Like I've got one on the bottom shelf here where I grow my dendrobiums, and this little guy has been there, and I, pull an orchid out, and its web is built between that pot and the other pot
Right. Right.
and the wall. Sorry,
Yeah.
buddy.
Yeah, I know. You can. You
Now
see,
the
the thing
only
is
other thing
that. Yeah, go ahead.
I have to keep my eyes out for is that the black non-poisonous house spiders here in Perth have a web that looks very similar to the redback web here in
Mm-hmm.
Perth. And now the
Mm-hmm.
redback is the black widow. And unlike black widows, redbacks are everywhere. So I am making for certain to get rid of all of these little webs just to
Yes.
be certain that it's not a redback colony that I have now forming inside of my home, because that would be less than ideal.
Right.
But for the most part, if it's a spider, and I can guarantee it's a spider, and I know it's not the kind here that'll kill me because most of the bugs here will hurt you,
Yes.
I leave them be. I do have a few of the little tiny dancing spiders
Yes.
that are living in the top shelf where my oncidiums are.
Mm-hmm.
And those are rare, and they're decorative little spiders, and they're beautiful little spiders, and they dance to attract their mate, and they're crazy little buddies.
Yeah.
And I leave those alone. I leave those
So,
alone.
but the regular pests, let's just say
Yeah.
scale, and again, I'm not saying that it's a pro to be in an indoor grow space and you have less pests, or it's a con that you are in an indoor grow space and you have more pests. I'm just trying to hear more of an opinion when it comes to that.
I find growing indoors does not
When we
absolve
talk
you.
about scale, mealybugs,
Yeah,
fungus gnats.
yeah. It doesn't absolve you of the pest issue. It just means you're not going to have it as bad as you do outdoors. Now, in Perth here, fungus gnats are an issue. Um, so I use a lot of Drosera sundews to catch them.
Yes.
As far as scale and other things go, I have had them come in on my pets, or say
Okay.
to your clothes, and you bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
So I still do, like in the spring, I'll do the garlic alcohol, and I'll mist everything, give everything a good wipe down. And then again, I'll do that a few weeks later, and then maybe once in the middle of summer, and then again twice in fall, and then not at all in
Right.
winter. Other than that, it's just a little bit here or there. And I would say that I've, touched wood, not had mealybugs,
Okay.
never had mealybugs. Had some thrips that came in on a plant that I purchased.
Right.
This is how most of the pests come in, is on something that you purchase and bring in, be it
Right.
an orchid or a house plant, or they attach to the dog, the cat,
Mm-hmm.
and they come in that
So,
way.
but let's just say your plant is clean. Would it be too exaggerated to say that indoor grow spaces reduce the pest problem, or is that depending
Yes,
on the vigilancy of the person, where the environment, where you're at?
I'd say
Just
it
an
reduces it a
opinion.
great. I'd say it reduces it a great deal.
Okay.
Um, I would think, depending on where you're at, it could mean you have none at all.
Mm-hmm.
No pets at all. If you don't have any pets to bring them in, and you're an indoor kind of person, and you rarely go outside, and your windows are kept mostly shut, and you don't have to worry about a breeze blowing them in,
Right.
you won't have the problem. Um, most of my problem, and I know it's from the pets because it's on the lower shelves where the
Right.
pets can get to. Yeah, yeah,
Interesting. And there's no predators for pests indoors as well. And yes, the indoors is also nice and warm. There's humidity, supposedly, if that's what we're talking about, setting up the grow space indoors. You're providing a nice environment. Plus, there's probably happy sap around somewhere. There's sugars, all these lovely
yeah.
things that they can feed off of. Outside, mostly, in many places, it can be a little bit nasty. And
And
indoors,
I'm
you've
going to
got all this
say,
lovely new growth, tender cells, and
for
juicy.
indoor growers, and I'm going to say this, is you get pests that you wouldn't think of as being pests. As a point in fact, palmetto bugs, the big, huge flying cockroaches, the red ones. I think they're called palmetto bugs in Florida. I think they're called American um, cockroaches, the big
Mm-hmm.
ones.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we get those a lot here. So if you've got the door open and you're running in and outside to do some grilling on the back patio, one of those will fly in, or they'll crawl in through the pet door, or a slug will come in through the pet door.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find during the hottest parts of the year, that those bugs come in, as do the ants, and they go for the water that's in my semi-hydro pots. Or I have seen a cockroach sitting on a leaf of a dendrobium and drinking the happy sap coming
Mm-hmm.
from. Yep.
Yeah.
Now they don't necessarily hurt the plant, but you have the added risk of cockroaches aren't clean and they could infect your plant. They could bring in host things.
Right. Right.
Touch wood, I haven't had that yet, but I have actually seen, and it was just sitting there like, this is the best thing on the planet. Just you could see it lapping it up.
Enjoying it. Yes.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, how do you get rid? So, you just pick it up, move it, squish it, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Because in Perth, that's a reality. I'm sure, like in Florida, I don't care how clean you are. If you got a door open, if you got a
Yeah.
doggy door, they'll
Same
find their
here.
way in.
It's the same here.
Now, I do find that the cockroaches, for the ants, I leave a little bowl of water outside, and that
Right.
keeps them outside. The cockroaches like the sweet, and they'll come
Yeah.
in for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
And
not necessarily, it is something that nobody should relax on. I would say complacency is the enemy of an orchid grower. That's sort of my little
yes,
mantra. And
yep,
just because you're growing indoors, it is not a pro in that sense that you will not be bothered by pests. So stay vigilant at all times. I think that would
yeah,
serve everybody. It's sort of like, an in-between thing. Again, when we're talking indoor grow space, this does not include greenhouses.
yeah.
Okay, so I
So
just
I,
make that distinction. I want to get to do live streams about greenhouses, etc. as well, but we're not talking controlled environment as a global umbrella kind of subject. It is specifically indoor grow space, indoors with you in the property, separate room, possibly, or as in Julie's case, several rooms, including bedroom, making it work and growing orchids successfully. So don't get complacent. Just because they're indoors doesn't mean that they are exempt. I have the same situation here. Meanwhile, I do open my terrace door regularly. So you can pretty much say, yeah, well, duh. But it's definitely, with the preventative measures, it's
definitely
not,
prevention is key.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's not that
yeah,
big a deal.
yeah.
So
Um,
go
and
ahead.
I do find that, when you're watering your plants, and for me, it's a take them to the kitchen sink and water them.
Hmm.
And while you have them at the kitchen sink and they're draining, then it's just as easy to
That's right.
garlic out
That's
all
right.
them.
And
And
I
then
also
usually by the
find,
time
yeah, sorry.
they're done draining, they've dried, and you put them back on the shelves.
Right. I
Yeah.
usually also find that because I'm handling mine a lot more during the winters, because I'm moving them in and out quite regularly, that I have a much better grip actually of my pest maintenance and everything while I'm doing this on a daily basis. Because I bring out 2 orchids, and as I walk, I look at them, and then I've got my garlic alcohol behind me. If I see anything, done, and that's it.
Yeah.
Whereas in the summer, when my orchids are outside, it's like, living la vida, I,
Yeah.
I don't, I actually just have them on the shelf and just, skim, like do all the lambada angles with my body to see if I can look under leaves, but I'm not actually moving them off the shelf enough. So if you grow indoors, touch your orchids, bring them in, have a look at them, and make sure that you're not, because they also say make sure your grow space has enough space so that your orchids don't touch each other, because the leaves are like the highway for the pests and everything. Well, if you have a large collection with limited space, because
That doesn't happen.
exactly, everything's going to
Yeah.
touch. So having said all
Um,
that, don't just be aware that indoor growing does not make you exempt from the issues with pests.
No, and I will say this: the sundew plants work really good
Yeah.
because they have to set with their feet wet.
Yes.
One or two here on a shelf, on each one of your shelves, will get all those little fungusy gnats, aphidy things, and you can see them, and you can go, oh, there's a lot more on here than there was, say,
Yeah.
a few days ago. I need to have a better look at what's going on the plants on that
Right.
shelf. Um,
Also,
so I
your
find
setup,
that helps.
your setup also will determine if you get more fungus gnats or not. Because if you're growing in organic media, you might want to be able to keep an eye on is your media breaking down, which will also attract, other pests
Fungus
and
gnats. Yeah.
yeah, so stuff like that. I think that if the with the growing inorganic, it also reduces a little bit that aspect of those kinds of pests, but it doesn't eliminate the other ones.
That's a good idea, Sandy.
Yeah, sugar water outside the pet door.
Yeah. I have to consider
Okay,
that.
so we did initially speak about humidity. Now, because you're growing indoors, how do you regulate the humidity when you say it gets a bit colder? Do you stop your humidifier? Would you consider it a
Yes.
con to have indoor grow space and then it gets a bit cooler and now we've got issues with that because you're putting the heater up or temperatures go down?
Okay. So
Does somebody
this
likes
is
to
where
sleep cold?
this is where my environment is, I guess, similar to yours. So wintertime, it rains pretty well every day, all the time. Um, so you have a good 4 months of solid rain. And during that time, my humidifiers doesn't run at all. It sits empty. I don't run it. The natural humidity from the environment, even with the air, the heat running, I can maintain 60, 65% housewide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
But that's just
wow.
because it's raining. So I think we've discussed this before that in Perth here, the Aboriginals say we have, instead of 4 seasons, 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that because we've got very hot, dry summers. You have a period of spring that's kind of hot, kind of dry, and then spring where it's mostly damp, but not every day. And then winter goes into winter rain. And then you fall, you've got those other two weird breakups where it goes, back into the warm hot. Um, so I pretty well am finding that I can run my humidifier 6 months of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and the other 6 months I don't really need to.
Right.
I just have to sort of watch my humidity gauges that I have mostly in
Yes.
the bedroom. And when I notice that that's creeping down towards 50, 52, and it's maintaining there for a few days, I'll turn it back on. And that'll depend on the weather outside. Sometimes, it's wetter longer. Like this year's spring seemed to last a lot longer than last year's. Um, so I just, again, force myself to check those ratings. But I have that monitor set up in a way that, again, I get up, I look on the shelves, it's right there, so I can see it and it's easy to monitor.
Right. Okay, so regulating humidity based on what's happening, it's not that big of a complication. It's not necessarily something one would consider a downside, a con, or something like that,
Yeah.
from what you're telling
And
me.
my
Because
humidifier, even if that weren't the case, my humidifier, I set it to a humidity level, so it turns off when it hits that level.
all right. Mm-hmm.
So I found that if I just let it and set it and forget it and then wait for it to ding, 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 I need more water back on, that by the time the new, that 4 months of winter have passed, that water in there is really gunky and you really got to clean it and a lot
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah.
So pretty well once the rains come, then I monitor it for a few days. And, once it's pretty well raining every day, I drain the humidifier and let it dry out.
Okay.
Yeah. And
So when
that's
we
usually
talk,
the time when I replace its filter.
okay. So when we talk about humidity, if you know me, you'll know what's coming next. The airflow during the winter, when you've got your fans during the summer, everything's easy. You need to cool the leaves down. How do you do that when it's a little bit cooler? Because it can have an evaporative cooling effect to put fans on, moving cool air around.
So my fans stay on all year long. And again, it's just a matter of they might go from, I have the little tiny fans, they only have one setting on or off. So those are on all the time. And the big oscillating fan that sits on my headboard that gets the top shelves, that one during the summertime, I have it running on power level 3. And then when it comes down to the in-between stages, I'll crank it down to 2 and then to number 1. And I can tell you that the big oscillating fan that I've now added to the bedroom, I only ever had that running on our very hottest days on number 2 setting. And then at nighttime, because I'm cold, I turn that one off.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So once again, it all is part of the regulation of an indoor grow space, which makes indoor growing actually very advantageous. And we're just nitpicking now at what could be the con side of it, because everything that could be a negative, we can actually turn it around pretty quickly with an indoor grow space and stop that from being a persistent negative, as opposed to outside, you're stuck with what you got. You've got hot temperatures, you've got dry air. It's very, very difficult. So indoor grow space is actually, it can be a con if you're not aware, but the whole thing, I would say 85% of indoor growing is pros. Nitpicking about the con is just to create awareness that it's not a one and done. You're not got your
it's
grow
not all
space.
sunshine and daisies.
Right. It's not like here's my grow space. I've got everything dialed in and hoping the orchids will grow. Hapana. There's more to it.
So I've got a question here from Trish. It says, do you find you water more when it's warmer in my, okay, so summers here is your winters. Do I find I water more? Yes and no. So the little seedling babies have always gotten watered 2 days a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays. And some of my frags and paths need a midweek top up in the summertime, because with the switch over to pumice, and they've grown such vigorous root systems, there's 3 plants in particular that are in my little cup-sized containers. They've taken so well to the pumice, they've grown such good roots that if I water them on Saturday, by Tuesday morning, their water well is empty. By Wednesday afternoon, the top layer of the pumice is starting to dry out despite the decorative pebbles. And I've let them go until Saturday, and they're just kind of limp and not looking great. Water them, and then they perk back up. So what I'm doing now is on those few plants, when I'm having to water the babies, I just give them a snort of water too, and that just enough to refill the reservoir a little bit, and that gets them through. I was not having that problem in the wintertime, but that's about the time that I was making the transition to the pumice. So I'll have to answer that come this winter, now that I've got the plants more suited and more rooted into the pumice, and I can give a better answer on that one. But definitely, and now this was the same problem I was having with these plants in the organic media. So they're just really thirsty. And I think on those plants, I should have given them a much deeper water well than I gave them.
That's something as well. Yes, definitely. I think that would make a big difference. So speaking of watering, because I have a note here on my end of things with a thought process when it comes to watering, we might as well seg straight into that. I have it as a con from my experience, because it can get messy, or it is tedious to carry orchids to where they will get watered. So that is my...
Yes, the biggest con is it Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um,
I find
so
that is just such a headache. And
yeah,
then, of course, if you're got it to shuffle orchids now, I'm in my case, I'm quite lucky. I can spill out sometimes, and I've got space, but some grow spaces are a little bit cluttered. And moving an orchid to get at another one, because everybody has different needs at different times. My first season with my orchids, it was like everybody had a rhythm and everybody was treated the same all the time. But once they started to get their mojo and their grow on, everybody now it's all shuffled. It's like when you look at a sound bar, an audio bar, it's all up and down, up and down, up and down. It's not steady throughout anymore. So that's a
so now
real headache and a con for me when I'm dealing with my orchids indoors.
that's an idea, Michael. Um, I physically transport every one of my plants to the kitchen to water them. And it usually takes me 5 to 6 hours to do.
Hmm.
Um, Now, the con here is a big one. And it's not just for me. It's if I had a house with a scullery, a second sink, a little scullery, that'd be different.
Yes.
For me, when I start the process of watering on Saturday mornings, because I'm still pretty well Saturday, Wednesdays, and you have to deal with it because I work full time plants.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is
Yeah.
when you get it. If you can't get it at that time, sorry. Um, so I get up again, lights come on at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I'm awake. And that's when I start watering. So I start my watering 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm done.
Wow.
But I'm in that kitchen and I've got the entirety of the kitchen taken up.
Right.
So if you're my family member and you want to get up and make yourself brekkie, I'm in your way.
You're out of luck.
You're shit out of luck. So when we have Eve, she comes Saturday nights for Sunday mornings, which is why Saturday is when I water. On a few days that we know that we're going to have Eve on the Saturday morning, then I'll get home from work and I'll water my big plants,
Right.
the ones in the big containers, and try to get those out of the way, just to make room.
Right.
Now I can say if you're lucky enough to say have a basement space or a huge bathroom with a double vanity and you can keep your sink in your kitchen and your kitchen free for your family to eat food, that's great. My house, when I designed the house, was designed to be a starter/retirement home. So it's small. Everything's within arm reach. I figured when I'm 90 and I'm in this house, I don't want to have to exhaust myself walking across the kitchen to get a pan to cook with. So it's all tight.
Yes.
It's not a tiny home.
Yes.
It's a compact home.
Yes.
So, yeah, the whole watering process is an ordeal for my family.
Right.
So I get up again, 7 a.m. I'm up anyway, and I try to get that rolling along. Now there is times because Dylan gets up about 10:30, and that's about when he's ready to eat. Now that's usually about the time that I've got the lounge room shelves done. And then I take the water that's left over from that, pour it into the whatever containers, and I take it outside or to my house plants, and I get out of the kitchen a bit for Dylan. He cooks his food, does whatever he needs to do, and then I clean that all up, get back in there, and I finish up. So that's part of why it takes such a long time.
Yeah.
And also, while I'm in the kitchen watering, I'll turn around and throw a load of laundry in. So
Yeah.
it's sort of a whole orchid chores, house chores
Yeah.
kind of a day. So that's
I
one
just
thing.
remember when my collection came in, and I thought, what a nightmare during the winter. Meanwhile, back in the day, when I started with my collection, my rack was where I'm sitting now, as I showed in a video. and I still had my dining table free, and my little desk at the front window was still not completely full. So what I pulled off the rack went onto the dining table, and then I had 2 buckets with towels because I to flush, especially transitioning orchids, flush, 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 no matter, you know.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of splashing and flushing. I mean, it felt good once it was done, but to start the process, it was, oh goodness me, what a
Yeah.
nightmare. So
And
that's
so
the,
for me, I
especially if you
actually,
got carpeting as well.
yeah, I was
Goodness me.
about to say my bedroom is carpeted, so those plants really have to drain
Yeah,
and have drippiness, you know,
yeah,
because even though you fill up, so I put my 2 fingers over the holes and I fill up the
yes,
cup to just above where the line is and then let it drain out. Well, there's still a little bit of water that's going to trickle
always.
down and drain out over a little bit. So that's really the most time consuming part is letting everything
Yes,
drain appropriately to get them back into the bedroom. Not such a big issue in the lounge room because the lounge room is tile.
right, right.
And to be honest with you, with the way I do my chores, is I don't mind getting the kitchen floor wet, the lounge room floor wet, because that just, I'm up.
We'll mop it up. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Because as you know, I'm doing the bottom shelves, I'm sweeping all the spider webs and the stuff that falls between there. And it just becomes part of
Yes.
the
Yes.
housework routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing where I would say, oh, yikes, especially when people are, for me, I admire people that have indoor grow spaces that do a wet dry cycle growing. I'm
Hmm.
like, good on you. I'm sure that must be super hard, unless you, especially on top of that, compound that with hard water. You can't just take your orchids to the sink and let fresh and good water run through, soft water. Now you're
Hmm.
dealing with this, that, and the other, and you've got a wet dry cycle, which means if you've got a nicely, temperature wise regulated space as well, that means they're warm. It doesn't change anything. You're still watering every second, every third day, depending on the
Yeah.
orchid. So watering for me with an indoor grow space in the early days was a con. Now I don't really care so much because the circumstances have changed. I don't have to water as much. There's a
Yeah.
big difference from back then to now. I'm only desperately happy to flush when my outdoor temperatures allow me to bring the orchids outside and then flush them through, because that's what I feel is my only downside when I can't, fertilize good enough. I still need to keep those root balls, give them some oxygen.
Yeah. Now
So
I'm going to throw out another con for growing indoors.
tell me.
And it's related to watering, but in a different way. So if you're outside and you've got misting and all of that nice setup in your greenhouse, and your plants get rinsed off, and dust. Okay, so inside the house, your plant leaves are not necessarily getting the rain to wash them clean.
Mm-hmm.
So you get dust, a lot of dust on your
Yes.
plants, and so you
Yes.
have to dust your plants.
Oh, I
Um,
get a lot of natural fertilizer as well because I have a flock of birds coming in to visit my
yeah,
my cockatoo, and they're leaving me their traces everywhere.
yeah. Whereas if you've got a greenhouse or a shade house or someplace with overhead misting, or you're growing outside and it rains, well, then all of that dust washes off your plants. Growing indoors, you have to dust your plants. Same way as you have to dust your TV set or your knicky knacks.
Right.
You have to dust your plants, and you do have to dust your plants because they breathe through their leaves. And if you don't get the dust off the plants, well, then you're giving your poor plants emphysema, where things
Right.
can't breathe.
Right.
Um, so that's a con in my book, and most of that is con related because I'm still too afraid to take my plants outside, even in
Yeah.
early morning, and give them a rinsing off, and then to leave them outside to dry out, because I know exactly how fast my Dendrobium speciosum burned
And
outside. And that's
yes.
an Australian native plant.
And then here's the
Um,
thing as well, we get distracted. Goodness me. We do something, la 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 la, 2 hours later, oh, heart attack moment. It's like, oh
and
my
then you have
word.
an orchid that's, cooked.
Exactly. Straight away.
And, that's for me, I'm not, you never dust your plants.
I like
um,
I like Lucy the cat's thought because we're still talking about watering. there's another con. She's absolutely right. Spread a lot of bugs by sharing water while indoors. Now,
Yeah,
she
you can do
mentioned
that.
in her
Yeah.
next comment that not so much with, she's not sharing because she's growing in leca now.
Now I do share my water, but I share water by groups. So
Yeah,
um, because I have an RO system, and as you know, Nina, with RO systems, you cannot produce a lot of it on demand like that. It's not just
no,
pour your
unless you
tap
want
on.
a pantry like mine that looks like bucket after bucket after bucket. Not
Yeah, well,
now,
I
but
have, these big 11-liter containers that you buy water with to go camping. I've
yes,
saved those and I
yes.
fill those up.
Yes.
So I have three of
My
those.
spare toilet, my guest toilet is full. Tried to go to the bathroom and sorry, no, that's all my
Yeah.
RO water stash.
So I'll do like groups of shelves with the same water. Like that
Yes,
entire shelving unit there will get
yes,
watered from the same 11 liters. I put it into one of those big plastic buckets. I mix all of my fertilizer or my CalMag or whatever's going into it. And then every plant on that shelf will get watered with that. If
yes.
they're getting fertilized or any sort of a CalMag treatment or seaweed treatment, they then will sit, even though they are in semi-hydro with the holes in the water level at the bottom. I'll still let them sit within the whole big bucket because the water level is higher than just the water level there for like a half an hour to really soak in those nutrients
Yeah,
before I let everything drain out to where only the water in the water well is there. And then that then becomes gray water, which I take outside and I feed my native plants outside garden plants, because we're only allowed to water for 3 minutes outside, for 3 minutes on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And believe me, in this heat, that's not enough water to keep even native plants outside from dying.
mm,
So that's how I repurpose the water.
yeah.
And they've actually come here in some councils, like Belmont, where Lynn Brooks at Lynn Brooks Orchids lives. Not Belmont, but one of the other councils
Hmm.
close to there. They're actually saying that for the orchid growers, and not just orchid growers, but people that have, greenhouses that grow their own tomatoes or whatnot in their greenhouses, that they're now limiting their water sprinklage usage to the same 3 days for 2 minutes, and
Oh,
that's it.
wow.
So you got a
Okay.
lot of these people going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So in WA, growing orchids indoors means they can't see how much water you're using. I don't know.
Yes, yes.
Um, but I have made it a point because water is a problem. Water is becoming a scarce resource throughout the world. The Euphrates is drying up. The Ural River, I think, in Europe is drying up.
Hmm.
Uh,
There's
Water
plenty of
here is,
rivers, or yeah, it's
yeah. So I was not sharing water for the longest time, but I've decided it's ethically and morally more correct for me to share the water and sort of run the risk. But I will say this: when I get new plants in, those plants are watered by themselves. They don't
yes,
get shared until I've had them for a month or two and know that there's no weirdness going on with them.
right. It's also understanding your collection. I mean, I shared water for the longest, tangent alert. I shared water
Mhm.
for the longest time with a Fusarium infected golden cell that I was
Yeah,
completely unaware that she had Fusarium. Now, when I
yeah,
say I share water, that means she's standing on the same table on the patio outside with a whole group of other orchids outside of her mask. I'm not exactly sharing, as in pouring the same water over the other ones, but as I flush, her crap comes out at the base and is a runoff and then hits other microfiber on the way down. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
So and you can say, okay, maybe for a one-off, nothing's going to go wrong. But I was doing it for years, at least 3 years, like that.
yeah.
So
Whereas
that's
mine go into a bucket. I scoop the water from the bucket into the pot. It drains back into the bucket. Next plant goes in.
yes, yes. I
Yeah,
mean, for me, when I flush, it's not just a luxury for my orchids. I'm telling you, it's a luxury for me as well because
yeah,
the resource is what it is. And I mean, yeah, we have to be a little bit more, let's say, aware of the fact that, it just take it for a grain of salt. I didn't want to get onto this tangent. I just wanted to mention that a con for indoor growing, in my opinion, is the watering becomes tedious. It's obnoxious. And yeah, it's a labor of love. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. There's no about it.
No, absolutely not. So
Yeah.
there is one more thing, the side effects of blurple. We've addressed that in the early thing, but I have to, even though it's always a little bit of an issue, because you know, what's expensive for me may not be expensive for somebody else. But for me, the con of indoor growing is the running costs. Now, we briefly touched upon that earlier because you mentioned you've got your solar panels, and that helps tremendously. And
Yep.
for that reason, I would say that wouldn't really affect you at all. But for, let's say, general public, including myself, who sets up a grow space, remember that buying the orchids is not the expensive part.
It's keeping them up.
It's the upkeep of them and the running cost of indoor light. You're talking lighting, heating or cooling, and fans for airflow. So there's a lot of utility that goes in there. And if you want to do the lights correctly, you're talking 12 hours a day as a margin. Please let's not get into specific about which orchid needs to go dormant, you know what I mean? But let's
or
just
which
say,
ones need longer photoperiods.
yes, as an average, let's say in the tropics, it's whether you're at altitude or not, it's 12 hours, 6:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the evening, like clockwork. That is your light. And that is every day. And then you're heating and you've got fans going. So the cost factor is something that it's like somebody says, well, I can buy myself a Mercedes. I've got plenty of money in the bank. And I always say, yes, but can you afford the insurance?
No, it's not the insurance on the Mercedes you can't afford. It's the upkeep and the maintenance.
Well, you know, put it all together. That is your running cost. You can't just go out and buy it and then not expect to have to deal with what it takes to maintain it and, you know, run it.
Now, I'll say that if you're growing in growing spaces in your living space, some of those costs are mitigated because you're also heating the house for your individual personal human comfort as well. However, it is the lights that do it. So now if you're growing and you're blessed enough to have a 9-bedroom house and you can, this whole 1-bedroom here is nothing for this kind of orchids, this one's for that, then that's a different story. But if you're growing like, say, Trish and I do in your home, in your living spaces, where you're sitting down watching TV, you got 600 orchids sitting right next to you. That's how I grow. Then, what your aircon's doing, what your heat's doing, that's doing that all over the house. That's fine anyway. If you're growing more specifically, like if I wanted to, I could invest the money in building myself a cool place. Like Lynn at Lynn Brooks Orchids has a specific little box that she had built that keeps the humidity at this level and the temperature at this level so that she can grow her Masdevallias and Draculas.
Yeah.
That's too much for me. No, I don't want to try to spend the money to air condition a glass case sitting outside in the heat and try to keep the humidity at 95% so I can have a Dracula orchid. That's too much.
Yeah. The thing is that some people also have their grow space in their spare room. So for me, for example, if I didn't have a house guest coming every summer for the stint, the spare room would be cleared out. It would be part grow space, part filming studio, So And I actually like the idea. I mean, apart from the fact I like to see my orchids, don't get me wrong, but if I were to have a separate grow space, I wouldn't necessarily do what I'm doing with my dining room at the moment. I would have them in a separate room where I could just futz around without interfering or, stopping the flow and etc. And that is then when the cost will come into effect because the spare room would otherwise be dark and closed off. Now you're running it.
Heated and not air conditioned. Yeah.
So I just want to
See,
make
that's the thing
people
is,
aware.
I've gotten so used to them being in my I don't think I could live without living in the jungle now.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be happy without coming out of my waking up and turning over and seeing a wall of plants smiling back at me.
yeah.
Waking up and turning over and like this morning, my Path Idiate opened up her second bud, and it's
Oh,
just
that's the first thing you saw.
at me. That's the first thing I saw this morning, and it's like, oh, that's nice. And then I
That
turn over,
is,
and my dog licks me in my face, and Dylan snores. So that was
that's
my morning. It was beautiful.
hey, hey. I would say that's paradise. That's a way to
Yeah,
start
yeah,
Sunday. That's awesome.
yeah.
So I
And
have gone through all our notes,
I
all of
think
them.
so.
I have. Now, if
Yeah.
we have any secondary thoughts that we can feed off of, I'm very happy to continue. But if anybody is waiting for me to prompt with more notes, every point that has been mentioned has now turned to red, as in it has been addressed. So
Tick.
yes, but I don't. Again, we're not done unless you say that you've got nothing more to add, or if you have a second thought, or if anybody has any questions, anything that the chat would like to add to that. Here we've got Sandy. Let me highlight this. That is hard to figure out. My lights are on and fans are on for 12 hours for the lights, 24/7 for the fans.
Yeah, that sounds how mine are. Yeah.
Mm. Well, the thing is that you'll notice, Sandy, when you get your greenhouse, when that starts to run, you'll notice it depends on what you do with your orchids. If you're going to leave them in the greenhouse for the winter, that's when the change will probably start to show you what is going on with the hobby. While they're indoors with you, and as the case with Julie's orchids, you wouldn't probably notice that much of a difference. But the
I
greenhouse
would say the
will
only thing to
change.
do, Sandy, is maybe to adjust your light periods throughout the year. So, give them the 12 hours during the growing season and then drop it down to 10, 8,
8.
10
I did 8.
hours. Yeah.
When during the
And if
winter
you,
here, I supplemented with 8 hours and it was
yeah.
fine. Meanwhile,
Um,
yes, I'm in Spain and yes, this and that, but I'm talking weeks on end. Like I had, I would have my last 10 days were perpetual darkness. That's when
yeah.
I would run my lights 8 hours, and I can't have my orchids outside during the winter for more than, let's say, 5 or 6 hours, even though it is sunny, because the temperature will drop radically. As from full 30, it starts to drop, and by the time I'm bringing 80, 85, 90 orchids inside, that takes me an hour. So I have to start
Yeah.
a little earlier,
Yeah.
you know. So 8 hours is plenty if you want to run it conservatively and not go over the top and worry about your utilities. It's fine, 8.
Yeah.
So that's my suggestion. I know 12 would be ideal, but if you can't do it, 8. If you want to be more generous, 10. But let's just be realistic that these plants, well, yes, I'm losing orchids, but my goodness, they are more resilient than I expected. So I should. It's more me that is panicking, because you don't want to lose an orchid ever. But
Yeah.
but I can see that there's more. It's okay. It's somehow it's okay.
But if you do have to lose the orchid and you can figure out why, then at least the sacrifice was a learning.
Well,
And
that
that to
that
me
and
legitimizes that a bit more. I've lost some orchids that I knew was because I was a newbie and just completely got the Karen culture wrong. And that's on me and I feel bad about it. But I learned. And for some
yeah,
of those plants that I've killed, I've learned, I can't do them. They're not
right.
doable for me in the climate. Yeah.
And that's another thing as well. They were doable for me back when the conditions were ideal, based on what I
Yeah.
bought in because of the conditions being ideal. And
Yeah.
now the collection is starting to weed itself out because of the conditions the way they are. So,
But there are so many plants that are intermediate.
yes, yes,
And
but
those are the ones, if you grow indoors, that you want to aim for
yeah, but
intermediate.
I'm not into a lot of intermediate ones are also hybrids. I'm not into that too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be a species snobs, but I love primary hybrids. Give me an sorry, excuse me. That was laughing and swallowing at the same time is not a good idea.
No.
But give me something like a primary hybrid, and I'll do it. But I'm not like.
Yeah.
And somebody tells me, get yourself now Miltoniopsis. I'm like, no, thank you, because I will have the stints in the summer, and I don't want to have a problem in the summer as well as the winter. So no.
Yeah. Now I went ahead and was stupid, and I got two more Miltoniopsis because, again, my climate's not the best for them.
Mm,
But I do know other people that grow them here very successfully in their shade houses. And well, if they can do them in their shade houses, why can't I grow them in my house?
right.
Um, and I'm going to say that I'm having much better luck this time around, but we haven't had air conditioning death like we did last year, which really
Right.
hurt everything. And that's a con. You go away on holiday
Yeah.
and you think everything is set up, your light's going to come on, you got your friend coming over to water your orchids and take care of them, and then you come back and you realize that halfway through your 2-week trip your air conditioning went and wasn't
Yeah.
running at all, and that the interior temperature of your bedroom was 52 degrees C and everything's dead. Well, that's a con because it happens, and it happened to me.
Yes.
So that's why I'm actually thinking that maybe those little smart plugs like
Yes.
Michael was talking about with the app might be better. Because again, consequently, what could have happened is they could have had a planned outage. I wouldn't have known about it, and I'd come home, and for 3 weeks, lights wouldn't have been working at all.
Right.
And so those are I think, some other good cons to point out, in that acts of God, we'll just call them acts of God. You can't control them. You can't control when Western Power decides, oh yeah, we need to fix this light here, which means we're going to knock out this power point here so that everybody in the entire city of Sterling and Balcata will have no power for 4.5 hours
Right.
in the middle of the day. And they don't necessarily announce them. But they're doing a lot of installation of the NBN here in my area. They're doing a lot of infrastructure updates to the electricals and the water lines. And there's a lot of new construction going up because they're, the older gentrified areas are being torn down. They're increasing the densities of the populations for this area. Like ours went from an R12 to an R22, which meant technically, if I could have afforded to buy all 3 plots of land here, I could have built a high-rise apartment and rented them out. So that's what they're doing here. And because of that, there's 7 houses within a 5-minute walk of mine that are in the process of construction right now. And at some point in time, for 2 of them, I know, because they've broken the lots up, they're going to have to kill the power for everybody in the neighborhood so that they can run from the node to their house. And that's going to affect, whoever from the node on is there. So that's another thing to consider if you're growing indoors, that you may come home to find an absolute crap storm because your air conditioner went out, you've been on holidays, and your plants are cooked to death. You've been on holidays and your plants are looking too dark and they've not had lights for 3 weeks. Those things too.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just having a think with Lucy the cat here. Her question is, it a con of growing outside if there are erratic weather conditions? I would like to know, what are the erratic conditions based on her area? Because my erratic weather conditions are the hot, dry winds. And if I say erratic, even though they are persistent and consistent, it is erratic. It makes absolutely no sense. And that's where I fight hard to keep them somewhat cooled down, because it's hot. Well, I would like it hotter, but anyway, it's hot. There's no humidity, and on top of the wind just adds to the heat. So it's just hot, hot, hot. And that is erratic for me. That is totally a stress point for the orchids. And I'm the one that's providing a lot of misting, it's constantly going around with the mister. Lucy the cat says her erratic conditions are freezing weather, unexpected frost. Yeah, of course, that is a downside of growing outdoors. Absolutely. I mean, some orchids can tolerate freezing weather, but they need a temperature rise during the day to counteract that. It's not good enough to have cold temperatures, and then the day is cold as well. They
Yeah.
need to have that temperature rise, like some purpuratas. I was talking about this with Fernanda Nacimiento Orchids and Succulents one day, that the fact that some purpuratas can go down to freezing, but their days shoot up to like 20 degrees Celsius, 23 degrees Celsius during the winter. But
Yep.
even if you don't get that, you can't say my orchid can go down to freezing if your days don't match that. Like
Yeah.
I've got a little bit of cold damage on my Neo. It's just showing some anthocyanin, nothing wrong with her. She's fine. But it was from the 10 days where it was super cold at night, and then the days didn't go above 13 degrees. That's
Yeah.
just not going to balance out, you know? So
Yeah.
there's that. But you wouldn't want your orchids outside. And if you've only got 8 to 10 months of the year, you can't grow, and then, you know, just keep them. If you want to, if you can, take them outside during the months of the year where you will not experience any of these conditions. You may have some windstorms, you know, make sure that they can't blow over. That's that kind of thing. Hurricanes are murder on orchids. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, thank God for living in WA. We don't get cyclones.
Yeah. Yes. You don't want to be in New Zealand right now.
They're getting nailed with it in New Zealand.
Yeah, you don't want to be there right now.
Is getting it as well. Fortunately, WA, with as harsh as its climate is, and we don't get those natural hurricanes. We get bushfires.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're more likely to burn to the ground here than to wash away.
Yeah, rainstorms, Lucy the cat, as long as it's like the rainstorms during the warmer months of the year, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, with rain comes wind more often than not. So you've got airflow and everything. I mean, if I were to have the opportunity to have more rain with warmer temperatures, my orchids would be outside soaking some of that up. So as long as it's, you know, I'm starting to think that your time frame for outdoor growing could be June, July, August, maybe the beginning of September. And that's those temperatures with rainstorms, windstorms, yeah, they'll bash your leaves. Look at my Phaeus. Unfortunately, that is a detriment to growing outdoors. But, you know, those are the things that they can deal with. Just make sure that your pots are secured. And accidents can and will happen. If you have an orchid in spike, don't take her outside. You might have, you know, you may not get any blooms. You have a lot of power bumps. Sandy's orchid says, you have a lot of power bumps. Wow. That's bad. I hate that. Especially when it's unexpected, because it can blow out your electronics as well. Yeah. That's just awful. I hate it. Hurricanes, and we get Michael MacArthur says we get wildfires and hurricanes. Yeah.
That's why I live in Perth.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. I'm seeing my weather forecasts, and we are supposed to be getting storm, gale, high winds again. And, you know, well, the damage is done is all I can say, so bring it. At the end of the day, what are you going to do? You know,
whereas we're expecting more record heat.
Yeah. I think it's going to balance itself out. Every time I see Australia getting a heat wave, that means Spain is about to get another cold and nasty dump weather. But yeah. Anyway, if nobody has any more questions, it's almost 2.5 hours. Time flies when you're having fun.
Thank you, everybody. Make sure you hit the like button.
Yeah, let me know if any thoughts come to your mind once the live goes back up off of private after it is processed. Let me know in the comments. Maybe this is food for thoughts, and then afterwards you think, yeah, but what about? Or you think of your own experience. Put that into the comments, and we can always continue this discussion with a follow-up. One more thing from Trisha's Orchid Life. Chris San, you're most welcome. We have high winds and snow in winter and high winds and dry, warm air in the spring, summer. Yeah, well, apart from the snow, you and I match, Trish, as well. Lucy the cat, you're very welcome. Thank you so much to Julie's Orchids, because
Thank you,
this was,
guys.
you know, without her, you would be listening to me yap away again. But thank you so, so much, Michelle Fucarino, as well. Everybody, whatever you're doing this afternoon, this evening, or this morning, there's only one condition that we all have. Michael McCarthy, thank you for being here and for your insights, sharing your information. Thank you so much. Just make sure that one condition applies, as always, that you stay safe. Take care. Bye.
Bye.